John sat alone in his quiet mountain cabin. The fire crackling softly as snow fell outside. The wind howled through the trees, making the windows rattle. It was a cold night, colder than usual, and John had planned to sleep early. He had no visitors, no neighbors, and he liked it that way. Since the war ended, he had chosen peace and silence. But then, just after midnight, he heard a knock, a slow, soft knock on the wooden door. He froze, holding his breath. No one ever came this far. Especially not during a storm. He grabbed his old rifle from beside the couch and moved slowly to the door. Another knock came, this time a little louder, a little faster. John took a deep breath and opened the door halfway. Standing there was a tall woman, not human. Her skin was pale blue, her eyes large and glowing softly in the dark. Snow clung to her dark robe, and she shivered as icy wind whipped around her. In her arms were two small alien children, one asleep, the other crying quietly. John blinked. Unsure if he was dreaming. Please, the woman whispered, her voice weak and soft. We need help. John stared, speechless. He had seen aliens before, during the war on the battlefield. In cities, but never like this, never one knocking. On his door, begging for help in the freezing cold. We have no place to go, she said, my children. You're cold, hungry. Please. John looked at the children, their faces covered in frost, their tiny bodies trembling. He didn't think, he just opened the door wider. Get in, he said quickly, before they freeze. She stepped inside, her boots leaving. Wet marks on the wooden floor, the warmth from the fire made the children stir. John quickly threw more wood into the flames. Sit near the fire, he said. I'll get towels. The woman gently laid her children on the rug near the fireplace. They huddled together, eyes wide with fear. John returned with a towel and handed it to her. She took it and began drying their tiny hands and feet. Are they okay? He asked, still unsure what to say. They will be, she said softly. Thank you, human. He sat down across from her, watching the steam rise from their bodies as the warmth took effect. They were alive, but just barely. You're the first person who didn't shut the door, she said after a while, her voice low. John frowned. You've been knocking on other doors? She nodded. For 2 days. In different towns, hiding during the day, walking at night. Why? He asked, What happened to you? She looked into the fire, her eyes heavy with sorrow. My mate is dead, she said. We were being hunted. They want my children, John leaned forward. Hunted? By who? My own people, she said. I broke a rule. I loved someone. I wasn't supposed to. Now they want to erase us. John felt a cold shiver, not from the weather, but from her words. He had seen many things during the war, but this was something else. I thought humans might help, she said. I heard stories that humans care for the weak, the lost. John looked at the two small children. Now asleep by the fire, he sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. You came to the wrong man, he said. I'm no hero, lady. She looked at him, her eyes calm but full of emotion. You opened the door. That makes you different, she whispered. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. Outside, the wind still screamed, but inside the cabin, there was peace. For now, then, quietly, the woman spoke again. May I ask something strange? John raised an eyebrow. Go ahead, she looked away, then back at him. We don't survive cold like you do. Our bodies shut down. She hesitated, then said softly, If we sleep near your warmth, we'll live. John blinked, unsure if he heard her right. You want to share the bed? Not like that, she said quickly. Just warmth. Nothing else. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood up and said, Come on, bring the kids. He led her to the small bedroom, laid out extra blankets, and turned on the small heater. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but tonight he'd given them warmth as the alien widow curled beside her children. She looked at him one last time and whispered, Thank you, human. You've done more than you know. John sat on the edge of the bed, rifled beside him. He stared out the window. Into the dark storm, somewhere out there, something was still coming. And he had a feeling this was just the beginning. John didn't. sleep much that night, even with the fire crackling in the stove and the wind dying down outside. His eyes stayed open, watching the shadows on the ceiling. The soft breathing of the alien woman and her 2 children filled the small bedroom. She lay on one side of the bed with the kids curled against her, while John sat on the edge, holding his rifle. He wasn't sure what bothered him more, the strange visitors in his home, or the fact that he didn't want them to leave around dawn. The woman stirred. She blinked slowly, her glowing eyes adjusting to the soft orange light from the fire. The youngest child made a small whimpering sound in her sleep. The woman placed a gentle hand over her and whispered something in a language John couldn't understand. "You didn't sleep," she said to John, without looking at him. "Didn't plan to," he replied, voice low. "Too many questions in my head." She sat up slowly, careful not to wake the children, and pulled the blanket tighter around her. "I meant it last night," she said softly. "We need your warmth to survive." "You mean body heat?" he asked, still confused. "Yes," she said, looking at him now, "not just physical heat, but the energy your kind gives off fits." "Alive?" John raised an eyebrow. "Energy?" She nodded. "Your species burns hotter than mine. Not just in body temperature, but in spirit." John looked at her for a moment, unsure if she meant it as poetry or science. "You're saying I give off life energy?" he asked, "like some kind of heater with feelings?" She smiled faintly. "You laugh, but it's true. You're kind or warm in more ways than you know." John didn't respond, but he stood up and moved to the kitchen. He started the kettle, pulling out an old box of tea he hadn't used in months. The woman followed quietly, wrapping the blanket around herself like a cloak. The cabin smelled of wood smoke and dust. The alien children were still asleep, peaceful now. "I don't even know your name," John said after a while, pouring hot water into a mug. She hesitated, then replied, "My name is Shari John," he said, handing her the mug. "Just John?" She held the mug carefully, as if it were made of gold. "Your kindness is strange," she said. "Most humans would never let someone like me inside." John shrugged. "Most people wouldn't knock in a storm carrying 2 half-frozen kids either." There was silence between them for a few seconds. Only the wind brushing against the walls outside. Shari finally asked, "Why? Do you live out here? Alone?" John took a deep breath, then said, "War leaves scars, not always on the body." He didn't offer more, and Shari didn't push, but her eyes said she understood. A sudden movement outside the window caught John's attention. He walked to it quickly and peeked through the frost-glazed glass. Just a squirrel darting across the snow. Still, his hand stayed close to the rifle. "They'll come soon," Shari said quietly behind him. "The ones who chase us. Who are they?" John asked, turning to face her enforcers. She said, her voice tightening, "My people's law keepers, trained killers, and what do they want with your kids?" "They want them gone," she said, her voice flat, "because of who I was and who I loved." "You mentioned your mate," John said. "You broke some rule by being with him." Shari nodded slowly, her fingers tightening around the warm mug. "My people value order over love," she said. "They chose my mate for me. Someone of status, but I refused, so they killed your real mate." John asked, trying to keep the anger out of his voice. "They didn't need to," she said bitterly. "He died trying to protect me and our children." John stood silent, the old anger in his chest burning again, the same kind he felt after the war. The kind that made him walk away from humanity for good. But now it was back. Because somewhere out there were beings who thought this woman and her kids didn't deserve to live. And John hated that feeling, because it meant he couldn't ignore it. "You should go," Shari suddenly said, her voice shaking. "They'll track us here, and I won't let you die for me." John didn't answer right away. He looked at the sleeping children, then back at her. "You're not kicking me out of my own house," he said. "If they come, I'll deal with it." "You would fight for strangers?" she asked softly. John stepped closer. "I don't see strangers," he said. "I see a mother. And 2 kids who didn't ask for any of this." Shari blinked quickly, eyes wet. "You don't know what that means to me," she whispered. "You don't have to tell me," John said. "Just stay warm, and let me worry about the rest outside." The sky was clearing, but far off in the distance, something dark moved against the snow. The hunters were coming, and John, whether he admitted it or not, was no longer just a lonely man in a cabin. He was becoming something else. Maybe even father. John awoke to silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, strange kind that made the skin crawl. He stepped outside the cabin just as the first orange light of morning touched the snow-covered trees. The storm had passed, the sky clear, but the forest was too quiet. No birds, no wind, no sound, just cold air and fresh snow. Then he saw it, a trail not left by deer or rabbit, but by boots heavy. Clawed boots deep in the snow, they led from the tree line all the way to the edge of his property, then vanished. John knelt down, eyes narrowing. The prints were fresh snow, more than an hour old. Someone had come close, then disappeared. He stood up slowly. His breath fogging in the air, he gripped his rifle tighter, heart thumping, back inside. The cabin, Shari, was already awake, standing near the children, alert and tense. You saw them, she said before he even spoke. Yes, John replied. One set of tracks, maybe a scout. They've found us, she said quietly. We don't have much time. John locked the cabin door and walked to the table where his old gear still lay: an army knife, binoculars, flares. I thought we'd have more time, he muttered. Shari moved closer to the window, eyes glowing faintly in the morning light. I knew they'd come, she said, but not so soon, not while. The children were still weak. John looked at her. Can they track by scent? She nodded, and sound and emotion. Emotion? He asked, confused. Yes, she said. We give off signals, fear. Love, anger, they sense it all. John glanced at the kids, still asleep near the fire. Then we better not panic, he said. Let's stay ahead of them, he handed. Shari, a spare walkie-talkie, unsure if she'd ever used one before. She took it and studied it carefully, her fingers brushing over the buttons. I'll learn, she said simply. Then she hesitated and looked him in the eyes. If I die, she whispered. Promise me you'll take them far away. Promise you'll keep them alive. John stared at her, something in his chest tightening. You're not dying, he said. Not while I'm here. For the next hour, they worked in silence. John rigged traps near the tree-line tripwires, sharp stakes, even an old flash mine he had hidden in a trunk. He covered the windows, checked the locks, and reinforced the door. Shari kept the children busy, teaching them to be quiet, to move fast, to hide when needed. They didn't cry, didn't complain. These were not soft children, they were survivors. And that made John even more determined. Then, at midday, the silence broke. A strange sound echoed through the trees. Like a whisper mixed with static, John ran to the window, eyes scanning the forest. And there, barely visible, stood a tall, dark figure, cloaked in shadow, staring at the cabin from the edge of the woods. Shari froze, her breath catching in her throat. That's one of them, she whispered, an enforcer. The figure didn't move, didn't approach, it just stood. There, watching, measuring. John didn't wait. He stepped outside with his rifle, aimed straight. Get off my land. He shouted into the cold air. The figure didn't answer, but slowly raised a hand. Long fingers opened, revealing a glowing stone with strange symbols. John didn't know what it meant, but he knew one thing: it was a warning. They weren't here to talk. They were preparing for something violent, back inside. Shari gripped his arm. They'll attack tonight, she said, when the dark covers them. Then we'll be ready, John replied. We'll fight, Shari. Looked at him with deep sadness. You don't understand, she said. These are not soldiers. They are destroyers, bred only to erase mistakes. John stepped closer. You're not a mistake. Shari. She didn't speak, but her eyes softened, for the first time since arriving. She leaned her head lightly against his shoulder. You speak like him, she whispered. My mate. He was brave too. John didn't know what to say, so he simply said, Then I'll try to be braver. That night, the children curled beneath the bed, hidden under thick blankets. John sat with his back against the door, rifle ready, while Shari stood near the window, her claws flexing silently. The moon rose above the trees, casting long, cold shadows, then from the forest. A shriek, sharp, inhuman, and close. They were coming, and John knew by morning. Everything could change. Asterisk, the moon was high when it began. The forest outside the cabin had gone completely dark. As if something had swallowed the stars, John sat with his rifle against the door. His eyes sharp, his muscles tense. Shari crouched near the window. Unmoving, her breath slow and steady, the only sound inside was the faint breathing of her children, hidden beneath the floorboards through a secret hatch John had made long. I go for emergencies then, without warning. Sharp metallic sound rang through the woods. Clink. John jolted, gripping his rifle. That was the tripwire, he whispered. Shari's claws slowly extended, glinting in the dim firelight. They're testing us, she said. One will trigger the trap. While the others look for weakness, another snap, this time followed by a low growling human like metal grinding. Against bone, John peeked through a slit in the window, and his heart skipped. He saw one of them. Crawling low to the ground like a shadow with legs, its skin covered in black armor. Eyes glowing faint red. Just one, he said. But I bet there's more, Shari nodded. Never looking away from the trees, they do not speak, they do not feel. They only end what they're ordered to. John took a breath and whispered, Then let's end them first. Suddenly the mine went off. Boom. A flash of white light lit the trees, followed by a scream so sharp it seemed to cut the wind. John leapt to his feet and aimed out the window. He saw one of the creatures, its leg blown off, twitching in the snow, but it didn't crawl away. Instead, it began to pull itself toward the cabin. Arms digging into the ground like hooks. They don't stop, John muttered, even when dying. Shari opened the door before he could stop her. She stepped out barefoot into the snow, her body glowing faint blue in the dark. John wanted to shout, but something told him this was her fight too. The creature reached her. Screeching through broken teeth, Shari let it come close, then grabbed its face with both hands. A blue spark jumped from her palms, and the creature fell limp, its armor steaming. John stared, stunned. What was that? Shari returned. Slowly, her face calm but her hands shaking. I was trained, she said, before they cast me out. I learned to kill them. Why didn't you tell me? John asked. She looked at him, eyes glowing fiercely. Because I didn't want to be that person again. A crash cut their conversation short. The back wall of the cabin exploded inward, wooden planks flying. Another enforcer burst in, this one, twice the size of the last. With thick arms and blade-like fingers, John fired twice, bang. But the bullets only slowed it down. Shari screamed for the children to stay hidden, then jumped between John and the beast. It swung a massive claw at her, but she ducked. Low, slashing at its leg, John rushed in from the side, smashing the stock of his rifle into its head. Together, they pushed it back, blow after blow, until it staggered. John rolled beneath it and stabbed his knife deep into its lower back. The creature let out a horrible cry and fell to the floor. Twitching, then went still. John gasped for air, blood running down his arm. Shari grabbed him, eyes wide. You're hurt, she said. I'll live, John muttered. We need to check the kids. They opened the hatch. Both children were safe but shaking. Shari hugged them close, whispering softly in their language. John sat against the wall, wiping sweat and blood from his face. His cabin was ruined, the wall half destroyed, windows broken, traps used up. But they were alive. For now, Shari looked over at him, her voice low. There will be more. She said this was only the first wave. John nodded slowly. Then we hit them harder next time, he said. We make them wish they never came here. Shari stared at him for a long time. You're not just a human, she said. You are something more. John chuckled, even through the pain. Don't say that too loud, he said, or I'll start to believe it. That night, they sat close again, not for warmth, but for strength. The children slept between them, and Shari leaned, her head on John's shoulder. Outside, the forest was still, but the danger wasn't over. The real enemy hadn't arrived yet, and when it did, John knew it would take everything to stop it. Morning light spilled through the broken wall of the cabin. The snow had stopped, but the cold had settled deeper into the forest. John sat at the edge of the bed, wrapping a bandage around his arm. His shirt stained from last night's fight. The cabin was no longer safe. Fit was a battlefield now, and both he and Shari knew it. Across the room, Shari knelt beside her children, brushing their hair gently, her hands trembling ever so slightly. She had fought like a warrior, stronger than John could have imagined, but there was something behind her eyes this morning, something she was holding back. John walked over and sat beside her on the floor. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded slowly, but didn't look up. "The children are scared," she said. "They need peace, but I've only brought them danger. You kept them alive," John said. "That matters more than peace." Shari looked at him. Then her expression distant. "I wasn't supposed to survive either," she said, "when I fled my world. I left behind more than just a home." John leaned forward, waiting. He'd known she was hiding something big, but he didn't expect what came next. "I was born to the High House of Veli," she said, her voice low and steady. "My bloodline was chosen to lead, not to love." John blinked. "Your royalty?" "Yes," she replied. "I was to be married to a warlord, a match made to unite powerful clans. But I refused," she continued, "because I met someone else, someone kind, someone ordinary." She paused, staring into the fire like it held the past. "He was a healer, not a warrior," she said softly. "He taught me that power doesn't come from blood, it comes from love." John listened silently. He had heard stories of alien politics before, but this felt too personal to be fiction. "I escaped the marriage," Shari said. "I chose him. We hid for a time. And we had children." Her hands gripped her knees. "But the High House found us, and they called it treason. They killed him." John asked gently. "They made it look like an accident," she said, her voice breaking for the first time. "But I know better." She looked at him with tears in her eyes. "They didn't stop there," she whispered. "They want to erase his memory completely, including the children." John clenched his jaw. "That's why they're hunting you," he said, "to erase the bloodline." Shari nodded. "I should have died with him," she said, "but I ran. I ran because I couldn't let them take the only pieces of him I had left." John placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did the right thing," he said. "You saved your children. That's what matters." Her lips trembled. "They'll never stop," she said, "as long as the children breathe. The High House will keep sending enforcers. Then we stop running," John said. "We make a stand." Shari looked at him with wide eyes. "You're not like other humans," she said. "Most would have shut the door the first night, John." He gave a tired smile. "I told you I'm not most." Shari leaned into him for a moment. Silent, then she whispered, "There's something else." "Something I didn't tell you before." John raised an eyebrow. "More secrets?" She hesitated, then reached behind her neck and lifted her long black hair, revealing a faint Skara symbol etched into her skin, glowing slightly. It wasn't a wound, it was a seal, something ancient and binding. "This is the bond mark," she said. "It means I once shared my soul with someone, my mate." John's voice dropped. "And now, if I mark another," she said, "they become one. With my line, they become the children's protector, not just in body, but by law, by blood." John stared at her, heartbeat slowing. "You're asking me to?" Shari shook her head quickly. "No," she said. "I only wanted you to know what it means. In case I don't make it." John stood slowly, turning to look out the broken wall, far off in the forest. Something shimmered. Movement. A flicker. Too far to see clearly, but enough to make his spine stiffen. He looked back at her. "I don't care about royal blood or old laws," he said, "but I made a promise to protect those kids, and I keep my promises." Shari's breath caught in her throat. "Then you're already one of us," she whispered, that night while the children slept. John sat beside the fire cleaning his weapons. Shari sat beside him, holding her children's blanket, and watched him with something new in her eyes, not just trust, but something deeper, outside. Another wave of cold wind blew through the trees, but this time the cabin didn't feel so cold, because something was changing between them. And when the next enemy came, it wouldn't face a broken alien mother and a lonely human. It would face a family. The morning came with fog, thick and heavy. It rolled through the trees like a silent warning. Hiding what lay ahead, John stepped outside with his rifle. Boots crunching softly in the snow, he stood at the edge of the clearing, scanning the woods with sharp eyes. Something was coming, he could feel it, not just in his gut, but in the quiet stillness of everything around him. No birds, no wind. Just fog and fear inside the cabin. Shari watched him through the broken wall. Her children were eating quietly by the fire. Too tired to play, too scared to ask questions, she stepped outside. Her bare feet silent on the frozen porch. "You didn't sleep again," she said softly. John shook his head. "Didn't want to," he said. "Feels like if I blink, they'll be here." She looked out into the fog with him, then whispered, "I dreamed of my mate last night." John didn't say anything, but he listened. "He held the children," she said, her voice soft, and he smiled. "But when I looked closer, it wasn't him. It was you." John turned slowly, meeting her eyes. "I'm not trying to replace him," he said. "I know," she replied. "But they already see you as something more." John glanced back at the cabin, where the two small alien children sat waiting. They looked at him differently now, not as a stranger, not as a guest, but as something solid, something safe. Shari stepped closer, her breath clouding in the air. "There's a ritual," she said, simple. "But ancient?" John raised a brow. "The bonding thing you mentioned?" "Yes," she said, "if you take the mark. They'll be your children by blood." She paused, then added, "You'll be hunted by my people forever if they find out." John chuckled under his breath. "I already shot 2 of them," he said. "Pretty sure I'm on a list." She smiled gently, but her voice turned serious. "This isn't a favor, John," she said. "It's a choice. It's a life." John took a breath and looked out into the trees. He had come to the mountains to disappear, to leave war, people, and pain behind. But now, he had found something more dangerous and more worth protecting than anything he'd known in years. He turned back to her. "Let's do it," he said simply. Shari blinked, surprised. "Are you sure?" "No," John said, "but I've been running long enough inside." The fire crackled as the children watched with quiet curiosity. Shari knelt before them and spoke gently in their language. Then she turned to John and held out a small blade. "Shaped like a curve of bone, this won't hurt," she said. "But it will last forever." John nodded, kneeling before her. Shari made a shallow mark just beneath his collarbone, a glowing blue line that faded into the skin, not as a scar, but something deeper, something ancient. When it was done, the room grew quiet, almost sacred. The children crawled into John's lap without a word, curling up against him. Shari sat beside them, and for the first time, there was no space between them. That night, they didn't sleep in separate corners. They slept together, warm and close, as a new kind of family. But peace never lasted long, not in war and not in love. Just before sunrise, a sound echoed through the forest, louder than before, a low hum, like an engine, deep and angry. John woke first and looked out the window. His blood turned cold. A ship, dark and massive, had landed just beyond the ridge. Not a scout, this was a war vessel. "They found us," he whispered. Shari stood behind him, her voice steady. "That's not just any ship. That's the High House." John turned to her. "Then they came for you?" "No," she said, eyes wide. "They came for you now." John looked down at the children, his children, and something sharp and fierce awakened in him. They weren't just passengers in his home anymore. They were his to protect. He grabbed his rifle and loaded the last few shells. "This is my land," he said. "They want war. I'll give it to them." Shari reached out and touched his face. "Thank you for choosing us," she said. John smiled. "I didn't choose," he said. "I just stopped pretending I hadn't already." Outside, the trees shook as heavy. Boots hit the snow. The final battle was coming, and John wasn't running anymore. He was ready to fight, not just as a soldier, but as a father. The forest shook as the warship's engines cooled. The snow melted around the metal beast, steam hissing through the trees like angry breath. John stood at the edge of the clearing, rifle in hand, eyes locked on the dark figures marching toward his cabin. Behind him, Shari wrapped the children in warm blankets and whispered goodbye just in case. "You don't have to do this alone," she said, stepping beside him, claws ready, eyes glowing. "I'm not," John said. "Not anymore." A cold wind blew through the trees as the first enforcer stepped into view, taller than the others. Armored head to toe, its face hidden beneath a helmet carved with the royal crest of Valai. John raised his rifle, but before he could fire, a voice echoed across the clearing. Not human, not machine, something between. Deep and commanding, "You have something that does not belong to you," it said. "Return the widow and the offspring, or death will be swift." John stepped forward. "You're on my land," he said loudly. "And I don't take kindly to threats," the voice answered without emotion. "Your land is irrelevant," John gritted his teeth. "Not to me," he said, then fired. The first shot hit the enforcer square and the chest sparks flew. But it kept coming. John rolled aside, reloaded, and fired again. This time, Shari leapt into the fight, claws slashing through armor, her body a blur of movement. More enforcers emerged from the fog, surrounding them. John ducked behind the cabin's broken wall and tossed a flash grenade. Light exploded. Buying them seconds, they used every trap, every weapon, every inch of ground like it was the last. Inside the cabin, the children hid beneath the floor. Again, hugging each other tight. They didn't cry, didn't scream. They believed in John. One enforcer kicked through the front wall, roaring. Shari tackled it, clawing at its face until its helmet cracked open, revealing a face with no soul, just glowing blue eyes and gray skin. Shot it clean through the head. He rushed to Shari, helping her up, her side bleeding. "You okay?" he asked. "Keep fighting," she said, gasping. "Don't stop." They fought like wolves protecting a den, till there were only 3 enforcers left. The leader stepped forward again. Slower now, it stared at John, then at Shari. "Is this your final stand, human?" it asked. John stood tall, bleeding but unshaken. "No," he said, "this is my family." The enforcer raised its blade, ready to strike, but before it could swing, a strange, high-pitched sound echoed through the air. The trees shimmered, and lights blinked above the clearing. Another ship, but this one was smaller, older, and marked with different colors. John turned to Shari, confused. She smiled through the pain. "I sent a signal 3 days ago," she said to the rebels. "The ones who still believe in peace." The new ship landed hard, and a dozen alien fighters poured out, tall like Shari, but dressed in dark leather and carrying energy spears. They attacked the remaining enforcers without mercy, surrounding the High House soldiers. Within minutes, it was over. The enforcer leader fell to the ground, defeated. The snow stained black with the end of a silent war. Shari collapsed beside John. Breathing hard, he caught her, holding her tightly. "You didn't tell me you had friends?" he said, smiling weakly. "I wasn't sure they'd come." She whispered, "But I had to hope later that evening." The fire was lit once again in the rebuilt cabin. The children sat beside John, laughing softly. Safe for the first time in weeks, Shari sat wrapped in a blanket, her wounds healing, her eyes never leaving John. One of the rebel fighters approached him. "You're the human who fought the High House," he said with respect. "They will not forget your name." "I'm not worried about names," John replied. "I only care that my family is safe." The fighter bowed and walked away as night fell. Shari whispered across the fire. "You didn't just protect us," she said. "You changed everything." John looked at her, then at the children. He reached for her hand, holding it gently. "Then let's build something new," he said, "together." The stars above blinked like tiny candles, and for the first time in a long while, they felt like home. The war was over, and a family had been born, not by blood, but by choice. John had made his stand, and this time he won more than just a fight. He won love, trust, and something he never expected to find again, a reason to live.